Read Me, Part 7 by KB Hurst. Julia went back home later that weekend, but we promised to keep each other informed about the lunatic asylum incident and what it had to do with Edmund Wright. It was still something at the back of both of our minds. I hoped that perhaps the Read Me book would offer up some information. Instead, it offered me more hidden gems and secrets, such as my next story. I picked up the book and sat it down on my lap after I had poured my Sunday morning coffee. The Read Me book didn't light up as it usually did, probably because it didn't have to beg my attention this time. Instead, this morning I was begging for its attention. I didn't feel the usual rise in my heart of fear or excitement. It was more like an expectant feeling, which was very much like you had with a loving parent, especially one's mother. I began to feel the book in my hand suddenly grow warm at my touch, and the book put out a positive aura. I felt, and this may sound odd, loved by it. I looked down, and there before me were no words. It was an empty canvas of yellowed and aged paper. I closed my eyes and felt it. That is when I began to see the book in my mind's eye. Inside my mind, the words and images came to life as though I were a blind man, suddenly able to see with my third eye. The Crystal Skull. I lifted my chest and took a deep breath. There before me was a young woman and an older man standing in a room staring at something under glass. I studied them intently. I watched as she swayed back, uncertain as to what she was going to do. The man seemed much more intent, and then he spoke. At first I could not make out what he was saying to the young woman. Then I saw both of them walk over to another glass case, and the man pointed to the glass case. Inside it was a black onyx skull. I heard the woman speak. Charlie, I'm not sure there's so many other things you could buy me. But there were only 13 in the world, and this, my dear, is the 14th skull. I just don't see the point. What can it do except sit on the shelf? Knowing it is yours to keep, Meg, my sweet, should be enough. I realized very quickly that they were famous. I gasped because the last time I had heard anything of Meg and Charlie Van Dove was when they both had gone missing 2 summers ago. Young Meg was an influencer who got her part playing a stupid teenager on YouTube, some reality show where billionaires live with people in trailers and see if they can even survive. It was appalling, but my daughter used to watch it religiously. Charlie Van Dove was a former senator's son who made his fortune selling boat engines. In his younger years, he was known as a playboy, then shocked everyone when he married Meg Vaught of Vaught Enterprises. Her family owned every cleaning product and 2 television networks. Then I heard the young woman speak to me. You're watching the event as I recall it, but this is the last thing I remember before Charlie changed. I know it sounds strange, and it will sound possibly insane, but ever since the moment he set his sights on that black skull, he was a man possessed. We were newly married when we got a call from one of his henchmen, as I called them. Called him to let him know about the new and rare find. Charlie was a collector of rare and fine antiques and was positively a hoarder. Only rich people have storage spaces for their hoarding, and Charlie had 75 to date. Everyone loved pleasing Charlie. If one of his helpers found something he liked, they made a commission. Everyone was in love with Charlie. Well, Charlie's money. I had my own, so I didn't care. I was in the process of rebuilding my brand of cell phone holders. I also had a record coming out the following spring, before the final event that eradicated all possibility of my becoming anything except a stupid celebrity known for playing the dumb blonde every chance I got. We had the building to ourselves while we looked at the black skull. "Where did you obtain it?" Charlie asked the young man standing before him. My Aunt Sylvia Stanton had it. She was given the skull after she finished making Tragedy in Egypt, one of her most thrilling films. Oh yes, I recall her. She was that weird artist that built that artist house, right? Who gave it to her? Charlie asked. A man of much wealth. He was known to have ties to the occult. He was no longer allowed to keep it. The skull told him he was no longer the keeper of the skull and must give it to someone that will watch over it. His time was up, so knowing Sylvia Stanton was a collector of rare things, he had no other option. Brilliant, Charlie had exclaimed. How would you like to pay, sir? Card. My assistant Tammy will send you my information first thing in the morning. The entire ride home, Charlie didn't take his eyes off of the skull. He seemed more preoccupied with it than his newly wedded wife. I tried not to get upset. He was always like that when he got a new toy. It was just a phase, I told myself. Only, it wasn't a phase. Once we were home, Charlie began locking himself in his vault to spend time alone with the skull. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. He only left for dinner or essential engagements. Our relationship began to deteriorate. The times we did see each other, we fought. My life began to be spent at all-night parties and clubs. I started seeing other people once I realized my husband could care less about me. Our vows no longer mattered. Paparazzi loved printing stories about me in their magazines. I didn't care. I let them print whatever the hell they wanted. Then one day, something changed. Charlie seemed to want to speak to me, only it wasn't why I thought. Meg, dearest, I need you to come into the vault with me. Puzzled, I put down my phone. I was on Instagram Live promoting a new line of handbags when he interrupted me. I pretended I was happy to see him and then signed out, blowing my viewers a kiss before I shut off the phone and looked up at him as though daggers could kill. What the fuck do you want? Look, I know things have been rather hard lately, but I think I finally figured out the mystery. I want to share it with you. Please, Meg. I stood up and let him lead me into the vault. When I went inside, I saw a glow of blue and purple coming from the skull. Thinking he had put a light under it, I crossed my arms and sighed. What's the meaning of this, Charlie? Look, sit across from me at the table and just listen. What am I listening to? Shh! I didn't hear anything. I was about to walk out thinking Charlie had finally gone over the bend when I heard whispering. I looked at Charlie. Are you doing that? No, please listen. Tell me, what do you hear? Whispering? I said, leaning into the skull. I heard screaming. I sat back in my chair, frightened. I heard other sounds too. Sounds like men fighting. It was as though I were listening to a recording of a war. Do you hear the men? He asked me. I nodded, looking up at Charlie. Ask them to show you anything. They'll show you the world, Meg. When will Audrey have dinner ready this evening? 7 o'clock. I heard it whisper. I wasn't sure I had heard it, but 5 minutes later, at precisely 7 sharp, I heard Audrey, our cook, ring the dinner bell. She never served dinner at the same time each night. Fascinated, I asked it other things, and it told me everything. Charlie and I missed our dinner that Audrey had slaved away over because we were so intent on learning all we could. The skull seemed to know everything. It was as though it had a memory built inside of it. It was like a recording device that kept track of every event from the beginning of time until this moment. It even knew events in the future. I slowly began to see the allure it had over Charlie. I couldn't place it, but something felt alive inside of it. It was like it was the keeper of souls. Days passed. I couldn't stop asking the crystal skull things. We asked things we shouldn't know of others. We asked things to make us more affluent and successful. We were greedy and stupid. We spent hours entertaining ourselves about trivial matters, such as what people we knew, stock market exchanges, the latest trends, the last ones, the future ones. Then one dark evening, I asked it something I only regretted later. What is the date of my death? August 20th, 2014. Shot dead by a silver bullet of a stranger. I heard the whispering say. I looked at Charlie and he smirked. You heard it wrong. No, that is tomorrow. When is Charlie gonna die? I asked as Charlie shot me dirty looks. At first we heard nothing. Then we heard it whisper deep until you could hear a deep voice speak from it. Charlie's hands trembled and tears welled up in his eyes when he listened to the answer. August 20th, 2014. Shot dead by a silver bullet of a stranger. Charlie looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, he left me alone with the crystal skull. I stared at the thing as it looked up at me with two gaping holes for eyes. The darkness in the item was evident to me now. It crept up upon my neck and down into my belly. I felt the tinge of fear of death that I was now inevitable, and it would come. I couldn't let it. I wouldn't allow it. Instead, I left the room and left the skull alone. I went to seek out Charlie to talk to him. We don't have to listen to it, I said to him. It's done. No. Look, I have an idea. What if we have a party with some friends tomorrow? Surely, if people are here, then we'll have some protection. We may even have people to help us if someone breaks in. Yes, I think that's the best idea. I had made up my mind. Charlie seemed comforted by the idea of a party. Having people here with us to help us stay alive was very important. If we had protection, nothing and no one would hurt us. Now, especially a stranger. So we planned a party for the day of our death. The day had gone off without a hitch. By 6 o'clock, we met our guests in the parlor. There were 4 other couples all together. The couple was a younger couple, Deb and Ryan. Ryan, we had both only met once. I wouldn't have considered him a stranger because we had met him once. So we danced, we ate, we carried on finally. After an excellent drunk, Charlie began to tell everyone about the black crystal skull. I had tried to get him to stop, but half the party was feeling rather rowdy by this time. Ryan pulled out a small bag of cocaine and crushed it up at our bar. He began offering everyone a share of the little white lines. I turned down the coke and tried to stand up from the wine I had drunk. I didn't realize it, but I was growing a bit dizzy. I finally could stand no longer and had to sit on the sofa. Ryan was talking to Charlie, who was bragging to everyone about our unique skull. He made everyone try asking the skull a question. So stupid. I couldn't remember what everyone asked. I just heard a lot of oohs and ahs. As the night wore down, Deb and Ryan were in a corner arguing. I was saying goodnight to our other guests. Just as the last guest had left, the doorbell rang. Thinking it was one of our guests that had forgotten something, Charlie answered the door. There, in front of him, was a tall man. He smiled graciously. "Hello. Sorry to barge in, but I'm here to pick up Deb and Ryan." "Mac!" Ryan yelled. "Come in, buddy!" I looked at Charlie, who was smiling. Hey, what's one more friend, right? I was concerned because we had never met Mac. "Sorry. Are you two ready to go?" Mac asked. Deb looked mad still as she stood in the corner with her arms crossed. She said nothing, which I thought was odd. "Hey, Charlie, you gotta show my boy Mac that trick you all do with that skull." "Oh, well, it's nothing." "No, you have to show Mac." Ryan turned to his friend Mac. "You're going to shit when you see this." "Ugh, all right." Charlie went into the vault and came back with the black crystal skull. "What is this?" Mac asked. "This is that weird skull I texted you about. You must check it out. Ask it anything." "Man, that's weird. What for?" Mac asked. "It will tell you anything." "Fine. Okay, so, where can I get a large chunk of change to buy my girlfriend an engagement ring?" "You want to marry Teresa?" Ryan laughed. "Shh. It'll tell you the answer. You gotta be quiet." "One silver bullet in your gun, in your back pocket, will give you the answers you seek. And no one will ever know the difference." Charlie looked up at me, and I looked at him. We both turned towards Mac, who was looking down at the skull. It was as if the last 24 hours had come down to this very moment. There was now a look in Mac's eyes, and he reached for his back pocket. His eyes grew a darker color, and he looked from us to Deb and Ryan. He pulled out the gun, and he shot me first. As I lay dying on our parlor floor, I heard the gun go off again. "Can't have Deb as a witness. She likes to talk," Ryan said to Mac. Charlie and Deb both were lying next to me on the floor, as Ryan and Mac began ransacking our vault. The last thing I heard was Mac asking the skull where to hide our bodies. "No one has the combination to the vault. It will be many, many winters before anyone comes to collect." I slowly fell into darkness, as I felt my body being carried into the vault as the door locked behind me. I lay slump over Deb and Charlie. Our bodies are still there should anyone come looking. I felt the life go out of me as a tear fell from my eye. What a tragic tale. I knew I needed to do the right thing, but how does one turn in a suspect whose name you don't fully know? I stood and I closed the book. Then I felt something hit me from behind as though an unknown source of lightning was shocking my spine. "Ah!" I screamed and cried at the pain that was now surging through me. I could feel the bullets that had shot Charlie, Deb, and Meg. As the electricity shot through me, I felt something leaving my body. I can't explain it. I was leaving my body. I had never had an out-of-body experience before, until now. I had not known such a thing could even be real. I was floating over my body, and I looked into the distance and could see the light beckoning me to come hither. My eyes grew in pain, and then I saw on a table on a store. It was sitting on a glass shelf with a white price tag on it. It was the black crystal skull. I looked around and recognized the store as the one that was on the edge of town. I suddenly grew exhausted and fell to the floor and back inside of my body. It was some hours before I woke. When I did, it was nearly dawn, Monday morning. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. I vaguely recalled what had occurred the evening before. I collected myself up off the floor and wandered into the kitchen, unsure as to what to do with all this knowledge. It felt very sure now of what I had to do. The README book was connected to souls who were telling their tales so they could move on in death. I felt a sense of urgency at that moment, for Meg and Charlie to have closure. I had to make sure their killers were found. And the only way that I could do that, as they would be long gone now, was to find that skull and ask it. So that morning, when the shop opened up, I went to Mysterium Emporium, and I purchased one black crystal skull. When I got home, I'd grown somewhat afraid of it, after everything that had happened to Charlie, Meg, and the others. The greed and pain. I wasn't sure why I had done it. Then I heard an intense voice coming from the skull. Finally, someone worthy of my knowledge. I am your final gift. Ask me anything, and I will help you, kind soul. So that's what I did. A few weeks later, I saw on the news that Mac and Ryan had been found at a different hideouts in the city of Portland, Oregon. I was happy to have helped them. I spent the rest of the day thinking that if the skull was the final gift to me, then what a powerful gift it was. I stored it in a box on my bookshelf, keeping it safe and hidden from all others' eyes. Part of me was saddened by the fact that the README book may be done with me. As I curled up in bed, I looked up at my ceiling and thought of all the lives I had perhaps helped. But something felt off, though, and I couldn't place what it was. I closed my eyes and drifted off to slumber. As I lay there, creeping into dreamland, I sat straight up out of bed. Edmund Wright, you are not finished yet, and the skull will know why you've come.